Hello everyone, welcome to the CG Cookie live stream. My name is Kent Trammell, and I'm being held prisoner in a basement somewhere. I don't know where I'm at. But my captors did give me a computer with internet access and forced me to stream. So they must be CG Cookie fans. In fact, one of them was named Omar. There was a Miranda, and then a Philip, or a Phil. But I must admit, the basement is pretty fitting for an October stream. I am kidding, of course, just trying to have a little bit of fun. It's been a while since I've seen you, so welcome to the stream. It's been, I think, over a month since we've hung out. I'm looking forward to it. Sorry for the bad joke. That's just for the few of you who show up at the very beginning of the stream. I'll get into professional mode momentarily, but I am in a basement. No more of that room that has been the standard streaming background. That is no more, unfortunately. I'm in the basement because we're selling our house, and a nerdy CG artist desk is an eyesore when it comes to marketing pictures and having, you know, house walkthroughs and stuff like that. So moved to the basement. That's where I'm at for the next month and a half or so. And then, awesome. Thank you for the green light on the sound and video. But yeah, that's why I'm down here, and it's kind of creepy, but I've grown to enjoy it, actually. So, yeah, fitting for an October creepy, spooky stream, which is why we are here. We are going to be learning how to sculpt and model, in general, this gravestone, which is a little bit overly stylized. You know, we're trying to really beat the mess out of this thing, more so than you'd find in like a realistic grave site, I suppose. But should be fun. We're going to learn some kind of classic rock sculpting techniques, how to sculpt cracks, how to beat the surface up in an artistic and also you know, somewhat efficient way. It's not hard to create the look. It's just tedious, if anything. But then also we're going to incorporate some text and how to Boolean text out of the surface of the gravestone, and then incorporate it with sculpting. Yeah, so there's going to be a bunch of fun little things to learn on this stream. And okay, I did accidentally embed the wrong stream video initially, but that was several minutes ago. I replaced it. So if you're just showing up now, you should be fine. But if not, if it seems delayed or something, like you're still seeing the countdown timer, then refresh, and you should see us live. I am on the ultra low latency, so we should be only like 5 seconds delayed. And yeah, so with that introduction out of the way, I suppose we can get started. If anyone's here for the first time, remember that you can ask questions by adding a capital letter Q in between two brackets. All right, that will add the blue question hashtag, which makes it easier for me to see. Rita, is the basement heated? It is not heated, so it's like you know, mid 60s, but I've got a little space heater at my feet keeping me warm. So it's cozy enough. Will this be available to download later? I really want to see this one. Yes, certainly. All streams are archived, as we call it. The recording uploaded to be viewed within 24 hours. So yeah, you can definitely watch it after the fact. All right, well, let's get started then. So again, I've already like prefaced the project, and this is the one I created for the research and development rehearsal kind of phase. So I'm just going to move this one off to the side. It'll serve as some reference if we need it. And then I'm going to start very simple. The approach to this is going to be beginning with a very simple base mesh, because, you know, this is going to be, it's kind of like in that space where it would be kind of silly, I think, to start from like a pure cube or a sphere. Like, I don't want to jump directly into sculpting. I want to block out the main shapes because they're very easy shapes to block out with polygon modeling, but more difficult shapes to create with sculpting, which is like how hard surface is kind of by nature. So we're going to start out very simply. Let me make sure that I have screencast keys enabled. There we go. Make sure that okay, yeah, I've got that enabled, and we will start simply with a mesh cube. And I'm going to tab into edit mode, go into the front view, hit G, Z, and 1 to move this flat onto the ground. I always say this, but I like to treat the ground plane as a ground. So I put things on top of it, and then we will just go to the face mode and then start to proportion this thing a little bit better, kind of a rectangular shape, as we see from our, whoops, wrong. Wow, I got to get in the zone a little bit. I haven't streamed in a while. I'm a little rusty. So let me scale that down, make it a little bit wider in the X direction. Okay. Maybe bring it down a little bit lower profile. And now for insetting this additional extrusion, we can use the I hotkey. Just pull that in, about like that. E to extrude in the Z axis. That looks good. All right, I'm going to keep that as one piece. And then just duplicate this and start the actual gravestone, the vertical portion of the gravestone. And we will, what did I do? All right, tab into edit mode on this one. And I will just start with a pair of verts, delete everything else. Kind of move it into position. And we will use a mirror modifier for this. And in the front view, I'll be able to block it out very well. I do want to intersect the surface for now. We will Boolean everything together and it'll be a nice watertight situation. But right now, we're just going to work on intersections. And then control right clicking. I will just create this shape. It's a little bit too extreme. And then create a little bevel there. Make sure I have clipping enabled in our mirror modifier. There we go. So that's kind of outlining the shape. We can then make sure that I going to, I don't need to mirror this in the Y-axis, I suppose, but let me move everything forward. E to extrude in the Y-axis, give it some thickness. There we go. And now I need to, how am I going to do this? I suppose I can just fill one big face. So E, extrude in the X direction. Again, this is going to be quick and dirty base mesh stuff. So we're not worried about topology being clean and quadded. We just want it to be ideal for smoothing and creating the essential shape. And so from here, might as well just fill in a face by itself like this. All right, so we've got the beginnings of the gravestone, and I mentioned that I do want to smooth this. I want it to be, I don't want it to look low poly. I want it to be high poly. One of a kind intro. So I want to add, let me see, maybe I shouldn't do this quite yet. Yeah, let me stick to the basic shapes first, and then once I have that blocked out, I will transition to adding holding edges so that it works well with subdivision surface. And we've got an inset extrusion similar to what we did on the bottom, but on the front side. So I can do that very easily. Since I created one big face, I can then go to face selection, select that, hit I to inset, and then I should be able to use, in our inset faces option, disable the boundary. Okay, that did not work. Oh, okay. Because I filled this face like a goober. All right, we do not need that face using the mirror modifier. And now let's try that again. Inset. Perfect. Let me go a little bit more. There we go. And then I don't need the bottom face. I don't want that to appear inset, actually. I want to move it down, maybe turn on vertex snapping. There we go. So good to see everybody. People being polite and saying hello to each other. It's a beautiful thing. Yeah, I miss more consistent streams. But I might give you a peek at what I've been working on that's been taking all my time at the end, because I'm pretty excited about it. But yeah, I miss hanging out with you guys. All right, so now that I've got that face inset, sorry, I'm going to E to extrude it out, give it a little bit of thickness. How much? About like that. I want to make sure that I have enough thickness to also compensate for another inset here for where the logo goes. So that should be enough. And then I need to create some topology, again, to think about the inset. If I cut an edge across horizontally, that'll provide a face at the top for us to inset very easily. So let me use the knife tool with the K hotkey and cut that in. Is that... might be a little bit low. Not enough room for the text. So let's slide this up. G twice. Maybe even further than that. Scale using the active element in Z, so it's perfectly flat. All right, now we can grab that face again. I to inset. I to inset again. Then we're going to push this inward in the Y axis. So G, Y. Oh yeah, so I think when I first built this, this was a separate piece. I wonder if I should do that again. Maybe not. I'm trying to think if there's anything I forgot. But that's why I was able to, I was expecting it to intersect with this other piece behind it, but it just kept going and going. That's going to be fine, I think. Cut another edge and just give it a little bit of a contour, a rounded contour like this. All right, and then at this point, I think we're ready to add some holding edges. All right, so I definitely want these to be hardened with a bevel. I don't think I need the bottom faces. Let's get rid of those. And then on the inside, let's see. I'll leave this one unselected so it's a nice curve that way, but I do want to harden the hard edges, the hard corners. And then this one is going to be kind of a weird topology. I hope that's going to be okay. All right, now I usually like to jump into Wireframe because it makes it much easier to see exactly what edges are selected. Just to do a review, make sure these are the only ones that I want to be hardened. I think that's true. All right, back to solid and Control B to enable to activate the bevel tool. And I want 2 segments and the profile up at 1. I want it to be fairly hard edged. And now the real test is Control 2 in object mode. Oh, did I accidentally... That's okay, I guess. Yeah, no, I think that looks pretty good. Nice. Anything else that I'm forgetting? Oh, I did forget to add beveled edges to this very simple shape. I mean, honestly, it's such simple geometry that I can just select everything, Control B, and bevel that. Shade smooth. Add a Control 2 subdivision surface modifier. Excellent. All right, at this point, I think we're ready to jump into the logo for one, and then also the text. So we'll do the logo first. Now, I should tell you where I got the logo. All right, so yeah, it's from the Blender Mesh Modeling Bootcamp. Most of you have probably already, taken this, but if you haven't, check it out. It's a great, post-beginner, but introduction to core modeling concepts. It's a really, really solid course from Jonathan Lampel, one of our more popular ones. But in Chapter 2, you will model the CG Cookie logo. And so from there, that is where I am, grabbing the source file. So download and the MMB logo source files. That's where I'm getting the shape from. And then when I jump over to back to Blender, I've got this saved into a file, which is, just to make it convenient. And so actually, maybe I will save the file. I will grab that logo in just a minute. But there's no reason to wait. Sorry, I'm trying to get my thoughts, get in the groove of this project. This is the 3rd time I've done it, so I should be a little more efficient than this. But I want to append that information from, let's see, where is it? We are in the Gravestone project, source, scene, and utility Booleans, object, CG Cookie logo. All right, so that is the logo we're going to be using to Boolean. So we've got that position. Now for the text. And I'll provide these source files, so if you want to watch this later and follow along, you can sculpt this exact thing if you want. I'm curious, is anyone following along with this now? I don't think I've ever asked that, but I wonder if people have the habit of like trying to do it as I'm doing it. If you are, press 1 in the chat. Just curious. Make sure I'm not missing any questions. Hello, Karen. Good to see you. Let's see. No questions. All right. So several of you are following along. Right on. Okay. Well, yeah, don't hesitate to ask any questions. If you get stuck on anything, I'll be happy to answer your questions, I guess. All right, so we've got the logo Boolean. Now it's time for text. And when it comes to text, I like to, as you kind of know from me by now, when it comes to images or video source material, textures, HDRIs, I like to find open source or what is the term, like public domain type material, and that is very plausible with text as well, with fonts. So if I jump back over to my browser, and I always Google open fonts for some reason. And I remember open fonts, but not fontlibrary.org. This is where I like to go because you can very easily, if I want a serif font, which speaking of, when it comes to a gravestone, it kind of makes sense to have just a common, easily chiselable font, for a gravestone. You don't want anything super extravagant or anything. So that's what I'm looking for, a font similar to this. And so I go to the serif category, and then you can also look for like public domain, CC0, for example. And so several good options here. I tried Ferrum, but it was a little too fancy to be efficient to work with. But Tenderness, I believe, is the one that I went with. So this one we can grab and you can download. You can search for all kinds of fonts here that are, if you search by the proper license, you can use, especially public domain, you can use for whatever you want. But I am going to go with that Tenderness font and go back to Blender. Now we can add our text object. So Shift A, let's add text. All right, I'm going to rotate in the X axis 90 degrees, and then from the front view, kind of position this. And so you're going to find all your text editing attributes in the object data, which is visible by this A icon. So we'll click on that. And fun fact, I don't think I might have never taught anything with text before this. If anyone knows my tutorials better than me, let me know. But I think this is the first time I've ever taught text, which is not like there's that much to teach. But so in the object data, this is where you can choose your font. The default is B font, and that's the only one available. But you can basically go grab whatever font you want. And you can, in the user preferences, edit preferences. In the file paths category, you can set a fonts directory. And so as far as I know, all that does, it doesn't automatically load the fonts into Blender, but it just makes it easy for you to click on that folder icon and it takes you right to where your fonts are, in your system fonts. And so Tenderness right here, that is what we're going to be using. And then to actually change the text, you tab into edit mode. And so the text we want to start with is RIP for rest in peace. And then I'll just leave that as one object, maybe enable, where is it? Paragraph, a horizontal alignment. We want that to be centered. Now my object origin is in the center, so you can scale it rather than scaling in the bottom left corner. So that looks pretty good for RIP. Duplicate the object, move it down, and tab it into edit mode. And we will type Reginald Clark Spitz. So I posted this on Twitter and someone got it pretty quickly. They got the meaning of the name. Does anyone know the meaning of the name? Want to take a guess at what that means? And if you saw it on Twitter, maybe don't guess. But if you haven't seen it on Twitter, give me a guess. There is a significance to Blender specifically, if you can guess. Wayne won't agree with you, Kent. That's a good clue, Miranda. He won't. And that's kind of why I did it. I like a friendly jab. If no one else, if at no one else at Wayne. Oh, so there's a question. I'm sorry, I missed. Everything is in half in the middle. Sheila, can you? That's not quite a question. Can you rephrase that? Maybe rephrase the question so I can answer that. Let's see. I would say Wes had a partner long ago, and no one has ever seen him again. I mean, I wouldn't put it past Wes. You know. All right, I will. Maybe I'll just leave it. I mean, when the name's going to be there, so if anyone wants to guess, think it through, and maybe I'll at the end of the stream I'll tell you what it is. It's not that clever. Once I reveal it, it's not that big of a deal. But in the moment, I thought it was real clever, I will say. So yeah, we've got this name, we've got the text set up, but converting it into a Boolean object is going to be a little bit of work. And this is where it becomes a little bit tedious, but I honestly couldn't figure out a better way to go about it. I mean, you could simplify it in a way, but you lose a little bit of detail. I'll show you what I mean. So once you have the text enabled, once you have the text enabled, once you have it edited the way you want, let's start with the RIP. We can simply go to Object. Actually, no, before I do that, wow, getting ahead of myself. I feel like I'm going super fast, by the way. I'm going to try and slow it down, chill out a little bit. So we're looking for the bevel depth, all right? We can increase this. That's not at all what I'm looking for. We are looking for the extrude option, extrude in the geometry tab. Again, we're in the object data of our text object, and the extrude we want to bring out, and that will do exactly that. Extrude it, give it some thickness. This is step one of making it Booleanable, making it effective for being a Boolean. So we will do the same thing down here. We can actually select both of them and alt-click drag on extrude. Oh, interesting. No, that doesn't work. Oh, okay. I think it's the scale is the problem. I scaled the name down. So Control A, apply the scale, and then alt-click drag the extrude. Interesting. I thought that's what it might do. So if one already has an extrusion, it looks like holding Alt and dragging, it just adds to that value. Whereas if I Alt-click and set the value to 0, and then Alt-click, they go out at the same extrusion depth. But if one of them is at 0, interesting. I didn't know it worked like that. Learn something new every day. Extrude, let's go like 0.1. Not that much. 0.05. There we go. All right, so now they've got thickness, and then this is where it starts to get tedious. So I'm going to select the RIP first and go to Object, Convert to a Mesh. All right. And then we'll go to Local View just so we can focus on specifically this. I don't know why the logo came with it. It wasn't selected. Funky. All right, so we're going to go to the side view, and what I want to do is in face select mode, I'm going to select the back half of faces, okay? Yeah, and I'm going to delete it, face. Now, the reason I'm doing this, the edits that I'm making, is if you look at a grave, let's see if I can find a good example, actually. I didn't think I would... Didn't think ahead to get a picture of this, but let's go to like Pixabay. How about what's my favorite? Unsplash.com. I'm going to show you what I'm trying to create with this text. Gravestone. None of them are like super zoomed in on the text, because Gravestone text has a specific look to it. We might just use Google. Gravestone font. Gravestone font. Here we go. Open image, a new tab. All right, so you can see here that the font, like, extrudes in down to a single line contour. So that's what I'm trying to create. And that I think is important for the look of the gravestone. And that's what I'm after right now. So I deleted those back faces because I want to do an inset here. And I can do that with simplified geometry. But, you know, if you just try to select the outer edges, the boundary edges, and hit F, it's not going to work because you've got this hole in the middle. So I need to kind of distinguish that hole by connecting an edge there and there. Maybe that's going to be enough. I can't remember. And now if we try to, well, maybe I have to fill this side first. Let's just fill with a face so I can just alt-click. All right, this geometry, again, it's only serving it's a means to an end. It's not going to be pretty. We're just going to be Booleaning it. Now we can fill that section first and then fill this section. There we go. Now I've got simplified faces both for selecting but also for insetting. I'm going to inset them so they get really, really thin. And then we can move these backward in the Y direction. And this is where I need to kind of figure out what depth I want. All right, so that looks pretty good. Then you're going to have some bad corners. Any of the 90-degree corners, they're going to be bad geometry. Simple fix, we can just select all of those bad verts. Whoops. And then select one that we want to be the end. And then Alt-M and choose Merge at Last. All right. It's a bunch of triangles, but again, we do not care about this geometry in the sense of being watertight quad geometry. We just want it to create the effect. All right, let's merge again, Alt-M at last. Now you might be thinking this is pretty tedious and you've got a bunch of letters. That is true, and when I created the original, I went one by one through those letters, which was not ideal, but you know, it's kind of like retopology. You get in the groove, and then I'll bet it only took me to do all the letters probably like a half hour, 20 minutes, maybe something like that. But that's the effect that I'm looking for. So I can even take this really thick portion and scale it thin if I want. Do the same thing over here. Oh, I forgot another corner that's messed up. Alt-M at last. There we go. Take this last edge and then move it to the left, to the right. Maybe I'm getting a little too specific here, because this would be way too tedious on a big mesh. I'm sorry, on all the letters. All right, that's going to be fine. And you can actually do this to multiple letters at a time. So we'll just do this to the RIP, and then the letters were part of the Boolean utility scene that I saved, so that you didn't have to watch me do this for all of them. But here, since we don't have a hole in the letter, we can just fill it. And then for the P, I think we can do the same thing, just fill it. All right, so select both of these, I to inset, and just make it really skinny. Yikes, it's going haywire on the P. I'm not sure I know why. If that does happen, I do feel like adding a little bit of, like breaking up the solid face helps. So I'm gonna hit J. And I think that should fix it. I to inset. Yeah, at least it doesn't happen until faces start, edges start crossing each other. All right, so we'll move that in Y. Scale the letter I horizontally just to make that a little bit skinnier. Same thing over here. And then I'm just going to clean up the corners real fast. As fast as I can. This one's a little bit different. we go. Just kind of really just like selecting everything that looks like it's crisscrossing and just merging it with a vertex that is properly positioned. So it's actually, it looks kind of weird, I'm sure, but I'm going to change my clipping plane to, I'm going to start it at 0.01. Now I can zoom in closer. Oh, make sure I'm not missing any questions. I'm sorry. This side from Bhavesh, this side of the fonts will be on the surface of the stone. Then why is there need to fill up the faces? So this is going to be a subtractive Boolean, and that's why the back side of the face is most important, and the front side is actually not important really at all. But yeah, I'm going to be taking away from the gravestone, like an engraving. And you'll see in just a second. Let's see. Karen, Kent, what version of Blender are you on? I am using, down here, you can, I think, see it, version 2.81.15. This was from yesterday. And I wanted to get used to the Blender Sculpt tools, both on this project, the new one's coming with 2.8 on this project, and on the other project I'm working on, which I might tease out at the end. But in both projects, I really haven't found much need to use these super specific new tools, other than the masking tools. But anyway, I haven't really found a need. I guess when I sculpt a character, most certainly that will be necessary. Anyway, yeah, I'm using 2.81, the beta. And does anyone else think it's kind of weird that we already have a 2.82 alpha when the beta of 2.81 isn't even final yet? I mean, are they like if a bug is in 2.81, are they also fixing it in 2.82? I think that's kind of weird. Anyway, I maybe they can handle it, but I feel like that would make the job of the developers really tedious. Let's see, Alt M at last. And I know that this text editing is super riveting, but only one more letter and then we'll move on. Excellent. And this letter has 4 corners. Alt M at last. Alt M at last. The only cool thing about the letters is, you know, most of the time at least when I model, and most modelers I think like to be very precise and, you know, model very clean and you know, it's like a badge of honor to have all quads and be very mindful of your mesh and your workflow. But in this case, you know, I'm just working quick and dirty, and that's kind of liberating. Once you see the final product, you'll see why we can work that way. Okay, so that's the concept of how to prep the letters. All right, we've got this backside, and then when I move over to use it as a Boolean object, we can select this object, our gravestone, go to the modifiers, add a Boolean on top of the subdivision surface, and we want it to be a difference, which is the default, and then select the RIP text. Now, nothing's going to happen because we're not intersecting, but if I select the RIP text and go to Object, Viewport Display, I'm looking for wire to be the display as. And this will help us to kind of visualize what the Boolean's doing. And as I move back to intersect with our gravestone, you'll see what that does. And then if I turn on or turn off overlays, you'll see what it is by itself, and I can still move that object. All right, so that's what we're after. All right, we've got the text as it bevels inward towards the inside of each letter. That is the effect that we're after. All right, so that works out really well. And yeah, that's the concept. So I'm not going to bore you to tears by going through all of these letters, but some tips if you want to do your own name and, you know, customize your gravestone if you want to do this project. Remember that you can duplicate letters. So you have, let's see, in this case, you have 2 L's. So don't worry about doing that twice. Just remember, do 1 L and duplicate it to the other spot. Wow, are there really not that many duplications? Yeah, maybe is that really the only one? Anyway, just remember you can duplicate. You don't have to repeat the process for multiple letters. All right, so to fast track this, I'm actually going to remove that Boolean that I just created. Where's my overlays? I'm going to remove that because I already have a completed version of this. If I just file append, let me also save the scene. Save the scene as record number 2. File append. Again, these files will be available to you if you want, and we will from this what's the name of the file called? Utility Booleans. We're going to grab objects, text, RCS, and RIP. By the way, there's no reason to drag it out anymore. The Reginald Clark Spitz is representative of RCS, which is right-click select. With 2.8 making left-click select the default. I thought that was funny. Wayne, there's always debate and always has been debate about right-click select versus left-click select. So I thought this was a funny jab to at least Wayne by putting it on a gravestone. But anyway, curious, if you use left-click select, press 1 in the chat. If you use right-click select still, press 2 in the chat. Make sure I'm not missing any questions. Oh, Jake was saying, I believe they split the builds like that so you could they could feature freeze and bug fix 2.81 while people working on new features can keep on in the 2.82 alpha. Interesting. So just thinking about that, they make all these new features based on a potentially bug-ridden version of 2.8, feature frozen version of 2.81. Anyway, I trust that they know what they're doing. I don't think I've ever seen that in the Blender development cycle before in all my years of using it, having 2 development versions, not being released yet. Very interesting. Thank you, Jake, for the insight. I did not know that. All right, make sure I'm not missing any questions. I was searching Google. Sorry about that. I hope it wasn't a disappointing reveal. Yeah, because I've mentioned in the Twitter and in my tweet that see if you can guess what the name means, and someone got it right away. So we've got 1, so left click select, still a 2, a right click select from Peter. Yeah, when Wayne and I talk about it, because he's pretty adamant that right click is technically better for working, but as we talked through it, I realized something, that he always uses the widget, right? So he uses, I don't even know how to turn it on in, oh no, how do I turn it on? The gizmo. Oh, it's that thing, these right here. Wayne always uses this, which is standard for 3ds Max and Maya, I'm pretty sure. But when I got into Blender, once I learned the hotkeys, I stopped using this entirely. And I think that if you use the widget, right-click select is better in certain cases, definitively better. But since if I don't use the widget, then it really doesn't bring much to the table as far as benefits. Anyway, I'll let the right-click select, left-click select rabbit hole end. And yeah, so I have imported the finished Boolean, and we can add, I might as well just join them, I suppose, and then we'll add that as a Boolean. I do agree the gizmo gets in the way. Once you learn the hotkeys, it's so freeing to not see that thing anymore, in my opinion. Boolean, let's select that RIP object. And same situation, I'm just going to change the viewport visibility to be wireframe. And turn off overlays, and then move that backwards until right about there. Excellent. There is the final text engraved into our base mesh. And that, I need to do, that's complete, but I need to finally Boolean this as well. This object too. So let's change that. When it comes to Booleans, you can tell that I like to switch it to wire, because if I don't do that, and in case you've never done this before, it's kind of annoying whenever you select that object as a Boolean. Let's add another Boolean to this object and then color pick that one. It looks like nothing happened, but that's only because this object is still a separate object technically. So by switching it to the viewport to be a wire, I kind of get a feel in my scene what are Booleans and what's not. However, in this case, we do not want it to be a difference operation. We want it to be a union. All right, so that's an additive process. If we look on the inside, a union and a Boolean, it's not intersecting. It's creating like a watertight mesh, so to speak. Whereas before, this is just two meshes intersecting. As we transition to the sculpting portion of the workflow, we want everything to be a watertight mesh. We do not want intersecting meshes to cause problems with sculpting. So that's another reason to be using Booleans. And yeah, so that is set up. I believe that's it for our base mesh finally. We can start transitioning to the sculpting portion. But I do want to just make sure that everything is watertight. I can apply the Boolean, so I might as well, let's see, maybe add one more level of subdivision surface. Let's go to viewport 3. I just don't want to see any faceting or as little faceting as possible. I think that looks pretty good. And then, all right, so I can apply this, turn on my overlays, and let's object convert to a mesh. create a wiki page for Reginald. Save the scene while I'm at it. Let's just version up. I think I'll save this version and then version up. Actually, let me undo so that I get my modifiers back. Then save it as version 2. Control S, Shift Control S, and save a new version. And then apply convert to mesh. All right, and by the way, the convert to mesh, if you haven't seen that before, all it really serves to do is just take all of the modifiers on an object and collapse it down to apply the object. It's the equivalent of going one by one and applying every modifier. Object convert to a mesh. We can get rid of the Booleans. And then I need to unionize with another Boolean. So change the operation to union, select that object, and also apply convert, object menu convert mesh, and get rid of the top. There we go. Now we've got one unified mesh. It's watertight, and this is going to be perfect for transitioning. It's going to be necessary for transitioning to sculpting. Now, one of the things to keep in mind is if I just jump into sculpting right now, the topology, let's turn the wireframe on shaded. The topology is okay, but there's also being Booleans. We've got edges and n-gons that don't connect. Like they're technically watertight, but like this corner does not connect into the mesh at all. So what we can do is use a remesh modifier that will make all of the topology cohesive and uniform, which is going to be ideal for jumping into sculpt mode. Also, what that will do is take the razor sharp text that we created and kind of smooth it out. So it has a couple uses, and it's a pretty useful process, I guess. So I'm going to disable the wireframe. Also save the file because we're going to be dealing with some really high polygon counts. And I want to just prepare for a crash if it happens. I haven't tested this while streaming, but I tested other parts while streaming, but not this specifically. All right, so we're going to add the remesh modifier to this object, and you'll see it immediately changes your topology, but we want to change the mode to be smooth. And the octree depth is the resolution of the detail. So if we change that, if we step it up slowly, like let's go to 5, you'll see that our detail slowly starts to come into play. And I don't know if this is helpful, but I've always thought of the remesh as like if you had a bunch of Spider-Men surrounding the object and just spraying their web from all different angles. That's kind of what remesh is doing, except instead of a web, it's polygonal geometry. And so if we look at the wireframe, you can kind of see that it's very uniform, grid-like topology that's just being applied to this from all angles. And as we increase the grid resolution, our detail comes into play. So let's, I actually know that I need, I want to say like a value of 10. All right, so now we're at an octree depth of 7. We're looking at actually only 170,000 polys, but the text is what needs so much geometry, especially, and the logo. But let's go up to 9. Cross our fingers that nothing breaks. And how does that look? Once we get close, the text does break down a little too much. It looks great on the RIP, but does not look good on Reginald's name. So let's jump up to octree depth of 10, which will take us into like, I don't know, 4 million polys. Keep your fingers and toes crossed. Oh, just under 4 million triangles. And now you can see how the Remesh modifier kind of smooths out the text. And our mesh is very, very dense. But that's going to be okay. The important thing is that we're getting consistent geometry. The text is being incorporated really well. And now, let's see. We could jump into sculpt mode like this, but we are going to be using dynamic topology. And so I might as well give it a decimate modifier just to optimize the mesh a little bit. So I'm going to add that decimate modifier because at 4 million polys, you know, dynamic topology doesn't really handle that much geometry super well. And so we're just getting started sculpting. I want it to be as responsive as possible. Don't want to start it out with a laggy sculpt mode. So the decimate modifier, I almost always default to go 0.1. So it's 10% of the geometry total. Yes, the remesh function is in 2.81, though I think like that's designed to I don't think it's designed for really high resolution remeshes. I think it's kind of like an in-between. It's equivalent to like whatever ZBrush uses. I forget if it's Z remesher or no, it's not that. I forgot what it's called in ZBrush, but it's like if you drag, I'll show you when I get there. I'll go over the remesh, kind of what it's useful for. But for a super high resolution remesh, I would recommend the modifier over the sculpt tool specifically. Decimate at where are we at? We're at 1. Oh, there we go. Finally finished. It takes a while to calculate. We're at 372,000 polys, I believe. That is still high resolution, certainly enough to keep the detail. But, okay, I forgot this part of the workflow. You can see that what's good about the decimate modifier is it's really efficient at putting the majority of detail where it's needed. So like in the text, there's a lot of geometry in the text specifically, but on the flat surfaces of the gravestone, it's very little geometry. It's like broad topology. So that's why decimate is really efficient. However, for sculpting, I don't really want there to be that much of a discrepancy, of a difference between the big and small polys. I want it to be a little more consistent. So before I add the decimate modifier, we are going to add a very subtle displace modifier. And I'm going to turn off decimate. That's why Blender's frozen for a second. And I'm going to add a a displace modifier. And this is going to be useful not only to provide more detail and thus a more consistent decimate modifier, but it's also going to give us a touch of global pattern to the surface. And that looks really, really bad, which is not what we want. For one, the ratio, no, not the ratio. I'm trying to move this modifier above the decimate. Took a second to do that. I'm going to save my file. And I want the strength to be a lot less, like 0.05. All right, we want a really low displacement strength. It's a little too late, but the other gravestone could have been left click select. I like that. All right, so the Displace Modifier, yes. What I'm going to do is create a new texture for this, and it's going to be a trusty Voronoi. More and more, I feel like I use Voronoi and noise by far the most out of any other texture. But Voronoi is going to get the job done. It's going to create a very subtle, like scalloped type of look to our gravestone, and it's going to be built into the geometry. So that's nice. I would want to do that anyway in sculpt mode, and I will touch it in sculpt mode, but I like that it's giving us a generic pattern to begin from. All right, so now that I've created the texture, we can call it Voronoi so we know what's up. And then I can click this button on the right where we go to the texture panel. And actually, I'm going to split our properties panel here. So the bottom one will be the texture and the upper one will be our Displace Modifier. So we can dial in those settings simultaneously. And I've created the Voronoi texture slot, but it's not an actual Voronoi texture type. So instead of image, which is the default, let's switch to Voronoi. See what that does for us. There we go. This is an extreme version of what I'm after, but this kind of scalloped pattern, it's going to give a stylistic surface quality to the whole object. And I like that, but still 0.05 is too strong. Let's go to 0.01. Wait for it to finish calculating. There we go. Much more subtle. Yeah, I think that looks good. I do want it to be very subtle. I think it's going to work great. And I think it's going to be enough geometry so that when we go back to the Decimate Modifier and enable that by clicking this button right here to enable the modifier in the viewport, probably take, I don't know, 10 seconds or so to calculate. But we should see a more consistent geometry pattern from the Decimate. Take a sip of my certainly cold apple cider now. Yeah, Blender, I mean, we're dealing with millions of polygons at this point, so it is going to be slow. And I do think streaming is taking some of that CPU power, but I didn't expect it to take this long, honestly. I hope it's not a crash. Don't be a crash. Just waiting. There we go. Thank you, Blender. All right, so we're still at 367,000 polys, which is about where we were before, but the pattern is so much more consistent. And the reason that matters is when you jump into sculpt mode, sometimes like auto creating the topology when there's a massive polygon right beside a really small one, it's just a little weird. It's a little clunky to work with. So this is going to be much better to work with. The detail is all there. It's looking great. So we are ready to apply this. I'll do one more save. Object, convert to mesh. Now, for whatever reason, whenever you do the convert to mesh, it's almost like it runs through the entire calculation again through all the modifiers. So we'll probably be waiting here for another 20, 30 seconds or so, given how long it took the last one. But, you know, I've never really understood why it takes that kind of time. I feel like it's already there. It's calculated. The mesh data is in RAM. So just, you know, apply it momentarily. But for whatever reason, it seems to go through the calculation. Omar has a question. Could Blender move faster if we apply the top modifier first? I'm forgetting what the top modifier was. It was Remesh. That's a good question. I don't know if I could go in and apply that one first and then go to the next modifier and then the next one. Maybe that is a good approach whenever you're dealing with really high resolution meshes. That is interesting, Omar. I have not tested that. Does ZBrush have the same slow issues or is it faster? That's a good question. I know ZBrush is definitely better at handling like millions, and I want to even say it's like at billions I want to say they said like they can handle billions of polygons. So yeah, as far as I know, ZBrush handles really, really high volumes of polygons better than Blender and Maya and 3ds Max, than pretty much any of them. But it's kind of built to be able to do that, like the super detailed sculptures. Still, in all of my sculpting, I've just never really needed that many polygons. But in this case, in Blender, you know, dealing with modifiers that have millions of polygons, like it just is going to take a while. But again, you know, to me, it's a small price to pay when I know that this workflow is going to work out and be very usable in sculpting. The end result, I feel like, justifies waiting on this. But I know that's boring to watch for you guys and boring for me to wait on. Any second. Any second. Tobles, you just watched the Carl Sagan billions and billions of polygons. Okay, there we go. Sorry, I noticed my Blender updated. And for some reason I tabbed into edit mode. There we go. All right, now we are finally done with the base mesh. We are ready to actually start sculpting. Now, sculpting rocks is a very fun exercise. I feel like it's easy entry level sculpting for a good result too, because it's forgiving. You're able to, once you set up the tools to work well for this particular use case, it's very forgiving, and it's a lot of fun to sculpt rocks. So that's what we're going to do now. Save a new version of the file. By the way, what do you guys think about the new, has anyone been using 2.81 or 2.82? I'm not sure what I think about the new file folder browser, new file browser window and UI. I don't know. It doesn't feel like a dramatic improvement, but it's definitely kind of tripping me up being used to the other one. Anyway, what am I doing here? I'm saving a new version, and we are ready to jump into sculpt mode, which I can grab. Jump into sculpt mode first, and then enable dynamic topology, and grab my pen and tablet. All right, so the crucial tool or brush that's going to be useful when it comes to sculpting rock is going to be the scrape brush. If we just do it by default out of the gate, make sure that initially I will use symmetry, and but we won't do that forever. So if we use scrape by itself, oh boy, it's starting to lag. What are my Dentopo settings? Oh, that's probably why. I'm gonna undo that. I don't need subdivide edges. I want to start with subdivide collapse. Does that work a little bit better? Oh boy. This is definitely laggier with the stream going on. But the by itself, the scrape tool works pretty well. And my mindset here, if we look at the original one, you know, we really want to beat this thing up a lot. Yeah, symmetry on purpose, Tobles, for now, because I'm going to do one pass of like lightly beating up the edges, and I'll just get that for free on both sides by using symmetry. And then once we start to add the more intense details, like really breaking off the corners, specifically adding cracks, I'll turn off symmetry. But I think I think symmetry is slowing it down right now. But to frame our mindset for how we're going to approach this, you can just think of it if it was like if it was like a styrofoam gravestone in real life that was perfectly sharp edged and everything. You're like taking, I don't know, a hammer or something like a pole and just like beating it up on the edges. That's what we're focusing on. We don't want any crisp, sharp edges at the end of this sculpture. We want everything to be very weathered, very beaten up in a stylistic way. You know, we want it to be, because that's kind of creepy. It's just overly exaggerated beating up this rock. Wouldn't Blender work faster if you get rid of the second grave? It certainly, now that we've talked about it, I might as well hide it. I wonder if it will improve the sculpting performance. That'd be a very welcome fix if it did. Yeah, I think that it's just a little bit... Maybe I should have gone lower. Should I have gone lower in the Decimate? It would have been worth a try, maybe. I don't know. I might not. I don't want to make you guys wait for those minutes again. So, but in hindsight, maybe I should have gone from 0.1 to like 0.05 to try and make it a little bit more efficient from the Decimate. But it's at the same time, you know, as we sculpt, I do want the detail to be pretty high level. So it's going to add and build up the geometry. So we're going to need high res geometry kind of anyway. But let me do an experiment. Let me do a little experiment. If we enable wireframe, and isn't there a brush? Simplify. I think maybe that's a 2 point. I don't know if this simplify brush. No, that's been around for a while. And if we change the dynamic topology to like 10, there we go. That will start to, on just the primarily flat surfaces, we can start to remove some geometry. And this is kind of a Band-Aid fix for me wishing I had gone lower on the... Oh, wait, in the back. This is totally a place. We're never going to see the back. So there's no reason to have a lot of geometry back here. So let's just simplify the mess out of this. Because I'm only going to plan on doing renders from the front. I mean, I can even go like 20, like really broaden these things. So yeah, simplify brush is pretty cool. I don't use it that often. Let's go back down to 10 and see if it helps on these. The only problem is I do think I'm probably getting rid of... Oh, not as much as I thought. I thought for sure I'd be getting rid of the Voronoi texture detail, but it's actually maintaining that fairly well. All right, what are we down to now? So we've taken about 40,000 polygons away. I'm gonna go to 30. Super broad. Again, on the bottom, we don't need good geometry whatsoever. We don't need high resolution geometry. We could just get rid of it. Now what are we down to? We saved like 60,000 polys. Hopefully that will make it a little more efficient. All right, let's get into the workflow, into the zone for sculpting this rock formation. First order of business is going to be beating up all of the hard edges. And I want this to be by hand, you know, like, because in theory, like the Gravestone when it was new, it would have looked like this. It would have had sharp edges and all this stuff, but it's been outside for, who knows, hundreds of years. And the weather and the elements have just taken a toll on it. So the edges are going to take the brunt of all of that weathering. So that's why we need to beat up the edges. And that's going to be our first pass. And that's why I'm also going to keep symmetry enabled. So with the scrape brush, we can do that by default. Oops. We need to lower our detail size back down to, what about 7? Is that going to be good enough? Collapse edges. Why is it so subtle? Why is it like really subtle at this part? It's not subtle over here. Huh. Scrape brush is... I honestly, when I'm sculpting rocks, I don't sculpt with a scrape brush by default. So maybe this is a good segue into how to tailor this brush to work better for rocks. If you go to the brush settings, we want to enable... They were already enabled. Okay, by default, you shouldn't have original normal and original plane enabled. So I recommend that you enable that. Oh, that's what it was. Let me just try and correct this. This should be the default settings that you have in your scrape brush. Forgot to reset to factory settings before I started streaming. But you should have your sculpt plane be on the area plane, and then original normal and original plane disabled. But when you enable those, and we'll start with the area plane, that is a much better, it's a more subtle type of beating up of the surface. Gosh, okay, I swear something is not right about this. Maybe it's fine. It's just not behaving the way I remember it in the rehearsals. Sometimes it's really, really subtle, and sometimes it's not. So maybe I should turn off the sensitivity, pressure sensitivity for the strength. No, that's not it. Anyway, I'm just going to roll with it. I'm not sure why it's working like that. But this also explains why the crease brush was not default whenever I started. All right, so let's start then with the default crease brush. Yeah, that's going to be actually a better behavior. That's going to be more intuitive, I think. So the only problem is it doesn't really feel like you're chiseling off the edges. It doesn't feel like you're beating it up. It feels like you're kind of, in some cases, smoothing it over. And that is not really what we want. We're not trying to smooth it. We're trying to beat it up. So as I talk through this, that does remind me, that's why I don't use the scrape brush whenever I'm doing this, at least not for long. I do think that enabling original normal, let's try just original normal. Original plane. Man. I'm sorry. Something is funky about this. I hate it whenever you rehearse twice and then you get to the stream and something is off. Mostly it's a stupid mistake on my part, but something is odd about this. Let's try, I'm going to take the detail size down to 5 because in this process I do realize that this is not high enough resolution for me. So maybe we won't even use the sculpt plane. Maybe we'll just use the view plane. So the big difference between area plane and view plane is the view plane is like a static plane in space that is aligned to your viewport. So like if I want, I can start planing away a ton of geometry and it's creating a perfectly flat surface right there. Okay, so that's what view plane does. And we're going to be using this to take large chunks out of the gravestone once we turn off symmetry. Sorry, having a brain fart. From Omar, are we creating the environment as well? In this stream, no, that's not the plan. When I did the rehearsal, when I came up with the project idea, I did want to do all of it in one, but it proves to be a little bit longer than the 2-hour span. So I mean, I would love to show you the shading if that's kind of what you guys would like to see. Maybe I can schedule a stream later for that. But yeah, this is only going to be covering the sculpting portion, not the lighting and shading. Another problem, as you mentioned that came to mind, is my brush. I think the beating up of the edges definitely works better if you turn the fall off to that. I thought it would have been the default. I keep going through my brush settings and something is off. I swear. Something just doesn't feel the way it always does. Let's just roll with it. I got to stop complaining about it. So I'm on view plane now, and the big difference here is you can do very extreme features. And so I think if I lightly touch all of the edges at this point, it'll work out fine. But just keep in mind that you can quickly create a feature that's too strong, stronger than what you set out to do. So all we're doing is case in point right there. So I guess it's important when you're using the view plane to kind of focus on the feature more directly. And that will keep it more subtle. I keep hoping I can go back to area plane and it'll just work better. I swear I don't understand. Like, it's super subtle and I don't get it. Is it your first time working in the basement? No, I've been in the basement for several weeks at this point. It's first time streaming from the basement, yes. Maybe the basement's bad luck for streaming for some reason. Anyway, I'm just kind of plowing through this. I don't know why sometimes the brush is super subtle, and then other times it's really strong. I can't quite get a handle on that, but it's not been my experience up until this stream. But, you know, typically my workflow is to start with the area plane method, right? So sculpt plane, leave it at area plane with original normal and original plane. And it should just, you know, like I'm taking multiple strokes to just kind of beat this thing up. Man, yeah, I just cannot figure out why it is subtle. Puts me in an awkward position to like recommend this workflow when I know that it's worked in the past, but it's not really working great now. Right-click select, the ghost of right-click select is having its way. But hopefully you can get the idea of what I'm going for. I'm just lightly beating up the edges all the way around, making sure that I'm being diligent and consistent to touch all of them. Reggie's ghost. I'm just going to try and do this as fast as possible so we can move on. It becomes a little more fun when we do the extreme details, like the cracks and stuff like that. I swear. Like, look, it's doing nothing. Like, I'm making a stroke constantly, and it's just doing nothing. I don't get that. Oh, I do need to turn symmetry off for the logo. Why would it do this? There's got to be a reason for it. What about plain trim? What if we turn that on? I don't think so. I do not know why that's not working. Anyway, just continuing to beat up the edges. If this takes too much longer, I'm just going to have to not do the entire grave and just do like half of it or a quarter of it so you can see the whole workflow, but not finish the entire project. Question from Dragon Ice: would it make a difference if you change to subdivide edges? Let's see. That's a valid point. What subdivide edges typically will do is just keep whatever high resolution geometry there is already. It'll keep it there. So it kind of is a way to make sure your details are high resolution. And so it looks good there, but then you can see how it's barely doing anything. So it doesn't seem to fix the kind of bizarre behavior of the brush right now. Here's an idea. What if I save this as a new version? If I reset Blender defaults, load factory settings, and then open Gravestone 5. Brush. Oh, so it keeps all of the brush settings in the scene file. I don't think I knew that. I think Blender used to save the brush settings like in the preferences. So that kind of did nothing, I guess. Anyway, oh yeah, there is one setting in your preferences. Input. I do like to reverse navigation, reverse the invert zoom mouse position. That one. There we go. So yeah, the subdivide edges does not fix the weird brush behavior, but what is nice about that, and once I get to, again, the higher resolution details, the higher frequency details, I will be enabling subdivide edges. But subdivide collapse, that's usually how I like to start, like get a more general kind of pattern down. Oh my gosh, this is driving me nuts. Like, literally almost zero effect. I mean, I don't like the flatten brush for this, because what the flatten brush does is it kind of tries to even out the edge, where it adds a little bit of geometry outside of the edge. You can see here how it kind of, it's like a weld seam almost. So that's why I don't like to use flatten. But man, this is just acting bizarre. All right, why is it doing that? Oh, wait. Oh, wait. Is that what it was? I think it was the radius sensitivity. That had to be what it was. That's it. Silly me. Silly me. It's whenever using this brush, I didn't realize you can't use radius sensitivity. So the pressure of your pen shouldn't be controlling how wide the brush is. Now this will start to feel like what I've been describing. All right, it really feels like you're beating up the edge. All right, so a bunch of strokes, you're gonna get this wonderful faceting on the edge. That is what I was after. Oh, it just feels good to know that I'm not crazy. Being Halloween and being a prisoner in my basement, I was starting to go a little crazy. Hooray. Thank you, team. We figured it out together. We really did. All right, so now I can much more efficiently beat up these edges. And it's fun again. Yay. And yeah, I'm looking to do this on all of the edges. And again, like, this is the kind of freeing, fun workflow that I wanted to show during the stream. Like, you can just start clicking and start making various strokes on the edge once your tool is set up, and you'll come out having this awesome beaten up edge look. Like, I don't have to fine tune this edge very much. It's very forgiving in how we approach it. So it makes for a very fun sculpting experience. Albeit tedious. You know, we do have a lot of edges, so we've got to be diligent and make sure that we touch all of them. But yeah, if you were following along and you actually made it and you're still following along, this is when it should get fun. But I wouldn't be surprised if you were following along and it was like, this guy doesn't know anything, I'm out of here. Oh yeah, I love the way this looks whenever it works. It looks so cool. There we go. That's starting to work out nice. Trying to be as fast as possible. Cool. All right, so the CG Cookie logo, that is looking pretty good. I still need to continue beating up these edges because they never got beaten up. And I forgot symmetry. I turned that off at one point and forgot it. Oh. Which brings me to a feature request. If the developer, what's his name? Pablo DeBarro, if he happens to be watching this, I would love a feature where I could mask out. Do I have? Okay, yeah, I have my overlays. I wish that I could mask out this area, let's say, and go to symmetrize only that masked out area. So I could like take the symmetry from all the symmetrical parts and regain symmetry. As far as I know, there's no really way to do it. And so I'm just going to have to accept that this will not be a finished gravestone when it's completely done, or when the stream is done. It's just going to have to be asymmetrical. Oh well. But that's always a bummer. If anyone can relate to that, whenever you think you have symmetry on and it's not, and you sculpted for like 10-15 minutes, it's so painful to do that 10-15 minutes again. Oh yeah, so this is the edge beat up that I signed up for. I mean, you can so quickly make this happen. And it's going to break up the silhouette. It's going to look beautifully stylized. And I do want to touch these edges because even though I won't see the backside, I will still see the silhouette from the front. Bang, bang, bang. Beat the edges up. That radius setting, and it gave me the business, didn't it? All right, quickly, let's try and get through this as fast as I possibly can. Don't you wish you had 2 times speed up on live streams? That has totally changed my YouTube viewing experience by using, I usually do 1.5, but sometimes go up to 2, and it allows you to consume so much more information faster. Probably didn't need to do this edge, but oh well. Very close to being done with pass number 1. And then we'll start to have the real fun. But, I mean, while I'm doing this, you know, we want to do the same thing to the text. So the fun part about this is the same way we did the logo. Just touching these edges will start to give you a beautiful, chiseled, weathered appearance. And all we're doing is just lightly touching them. The brush is doing all the work, really. Oh, come on. Do I have enough undos to get back to where I shouldn't have turned on symmetry? I'm such a scrub. Jakes, you feel what just happened. So silly. I don't think I have enough to do undos. Something to keep in mind that you just saw in real time is whenever you do this sculpt approach to where we're touching the edges a lot, like Morse code all over the edges, you kind of shoot your undo ability in the foot. So we're just gonna have to let's problem solve this because this is a pretty bad issue. How about the fill brush? Yeah, in theory that should do what we want, right? And I didn't save a version of this beforehand. I am amateur at best. All right. That should get us through the woods. Let's go to the scrape brush and try and flatten this out. Yeah, let's chalk it up to, that's going to be good enough. And we've got a nice asymmetrical weather detail in there. Yeah, sure, that was the intention all along. Now we can go back to beating up these edges. Yeah. Oh, I'm using the flatten brush. That's why it felt weird. Just blame your wife for sending me to the basement. You know, it was actually, she recommended doing this a long time ago, like maybe a year ago, and I was like, that's gross down there. I'm not doing that. But when it came to selling the house, it was my idea. I guess I remembered her saying that, and so it was my initiative to come down here. But so I guess I can't quite blame her. But anyway, it's been a good. It's been a lot easier to focus too. I mean, I love my kids to death, but it can be hard to work when they're in the next room being 2- and 4-year-olds. All right, my sculpt is getting pretty slow, so let me try and go to Dentopo Optimize. See if that helps at all. But this is, you know, I'll just work on this letter and then we'll skip the rest of them. Again, the workflow is the most important thing. So that is the end result, really. And it works out super well whenever you apply it to the entire, all these letters. In fact, if I remember correctly, I want to say that I like increase the detail size to like, I should say decrease the detail size to like 2, and then use a really small brush and kind of, or a really light brush, light strength, and just kind of, yeah, touch all of this. Yeah, so that will allow me to kind of do all the letters pretty quickly. Yeah, that looks good. And I do think this is important because something that I see a lot of times with beginners is if they add letters to something, like it's super sharp and super defined. There was someone in the workshop who did a sign, at the workshop a few months ago, where they did a sign and everything looked great. The wood looked worn and weathered, had a lot of grime going on, but then the letters were like razor sharp cut into the sign or added to the sign. And that kind of ruins the effect. You really want it to be subtle and you want it to be incorporated. And so in this gravestone, I definitely want to touch all of these letters, make sure that it's got a nice incorporated appearance. It looks weathered. All right, so that is going to be it for that. You know, I wonder, I talked about, I wish I'd made the Decimate modifier lower. I mean, why not do that now? Why not? We got the freedom. Let's do it. I'm in object mode. Let's add another Decimate modifier and just take down the resolution for the sake of being a little more fluid in our workflow. Decimate. Let's go down to 0.2. See how much detail we can retain. I don't love to do this because I'm almost certain that I will lose some detail. But we're at, 72,000. I'm sold. Let's go with it. Apply. Save. Yes. Thank you. Save. The save police. We need to get a badge on CG Cookie, save police, because several of you, I don't know how we could measure that, but several of you deserve the save police badge. Am I missing any questions? Would a plugin not be very handy for this? If you mean like if a plugin could automatically go over all the edges and beat them up the way I was doing, yes, but you know, there's also like it's fun to do that by hand. Now in this stream, I've run into some silly issues where I forgot the radius thing. But whenever you're in the groove, like it's a lot of fun to sculpt, I swear. So in that case, I do like to do it by hand. I like to take that artist approach and you know, get my hands dirty, quote unquote. Question, a new feature for the chat, like the question. Yeah, oh no, absolutely. An S in the brackets, I suppose. I think, by the way, the Q, I think that needs to be capital. I think that's when it'll work. But yeah, capital S for a save police, that would be pretty neat. I like that idea. All right, so that was really only the first pass of sculpting. I just wanted to beat up the edges. Now we can create some more, if we look at our original, the more feature distinguishing things, like big cracks, big chunks taken out of the gravestone. That's what we're going to move our attention to now. Also, these little, in the flat surfaces, these little kind of pot marks, that's going to help with the final look. And I have about a half hour to address all of this. So yeah, I think we might have enough time. Jump back into sculpt mode with our newly optimized mesh. I'm very happy that it kept the detail as well as it did. And it's already feeling snappier. All right, so this time, to create those distinguishing features, I am going to switch to view plane. Now that I know that the radius was the culprit for the brush feeling weird, I can confidently say that this is how you set it up. You want your brush in the view plane, and you want original normal and original plane enabled. All right, so in the case of the original, I don't think that's really slowing us down. I think I should be able to keep that enabled. All right, so I'm going to put, first thing to do is I'm going to chisel off this corner. That's one of the distinguishing features that we want to disable symmetry, and I really want to plane down this corner a lot. All right, so this is where it gets fun. You can start to see it's already much more strong in the effect of this brush, but it's also creating a wonderful scalloped, rocky surface quality. So again, like this is useful if you wanted to sculpt cliffs, if you want to sculpt a mountain, you know, like stone floor tiles. If you wanted to sculpt some creature made of stone. When I first started using this workflow, it was, you know, I sculpted like a bear, like as if it was chiseled out of stone, and it was a really rough hewn type look. So that's a lot of fun. It's very applicable, this type of workflow. And yeah, now that I'm chiseling off this corner big time, you know, like, that just happens with rocks. Like a sharp corner will just fall off a lot. You see it with sculptures, like there's famous sculptures where the nose falls off, like just over time it broke off. I don't know if someone hit it with something or what, but that's the kind of the concept here. So I'm chiseling that off. I only want to do it on a couple corners. I don't want to do it on all of them. I might do it on both on the bottom, with the idea being, you know, people walk around the grave, so maybe people have stepped on it over the years, over the decades. So maybe both of the corners are kind of chiseled off. And I also want to try and make them look unique. I don't want them to look exactly the same. I always want, if I'm going to take the time to do it by hand, I want it to look that way. I don't want it to look like the exact same chisel. All right, so in this case, maybe I will kind of plane most of it away, favoring the left side of the corner. Yeah, something like that. Very cool. Can the badge be like this? Yeah, Omar, I like the, I don't know if that's technically possible other than just the CSS, like blue, whatever, like color. But if you could add like some images, that would be so fun. All right. So we beat up those corners pretty good. So yeah, that's one aspect, really trimming off entire corners. Next, we can start to add big major cracks. So if I look at my original one, just, you know, as a reference, you can make cracks wherever you want, but I don't know, I like the way the first one turned out, so I'm trying to keep it authentic to that. Let's start up here. Wipe my nose real quick. Got some sort of a cold last night, unfortunately. All right, so the way I want to start this is I want to look at an angle, because remember the way that the view plane works is it's in line with my camera angle. So if my camera angle is looking at an angle, then when I start to sculpt according to that angle, it's going to create this kind of V depth cut. And that's how we can get the process started. And I think that the plane is always perpendicular. Is that the right term? Or parallel? What, like yeah, I think it's parallel. The plane that we're talking about is parallel to the camera, but it that's not right. It's perpendicular to the normal of the camera, the direction of the camera. And it starts wherever you click first. So if I click on the corner, like that's where the plane is going to flatten toward. So in this case, I can continue the cut down into this. All right, so now we've got this big chunk taken away. Oh no, you know what? I never changed the dynamic topology detail size. It's still at like 2. So it's putting way too much geometry. No, the house that I've been in for the past almost 6 years has always had a basement. Ah, nuts. Come on. Come back to me, Blender. Has always had a basement. We only use it for storage until now. But we're moving into our new house at the end of November, I believe. You've never really gone into sculpting as of yet. Well, this stream has been a plethora of what not to do in sculpt mode. Like, don't forget to turn off symmetry when you want it on. Don't forget to leave your detail size super low so you're sculpting with way too high geometry. Oh man, did it freeze? I think it's safe to say I'm a little rusty with the streaming. I thought rehearsing this twice would have been enough, but I have been very rusty today. I do apologize. Question: How would one add the basketball presses thingy Voronoi to a block? Oh, the basketball presses. Oh yeah, I guess it in a way like the Voronoi does kind of look like the pattern on a basketball, like the dimples. I think Blender might have stopped. Let me check. Oh, it came back. But like, look at the geometry. That is way too much. I don't need that much. Oh, I did it on all of it. I wonder if the Simplify brush, can we get that back down to 5? I think when it comes to sculpting, I need a save police. Well, that's anything in Blender. But when it comes to sculpting, I need a symmetry police and a detail size police. So if anyone wants to volunteer for that, I would appreciate it. Simplify. Maybe it's fine on the corners, but this especially was just overkill. I've never really used the Simplify brush that much either. That works super well. I think this is fine because I actually do want that really high resolution detail, but anyway, let's get back to sculpting. All right, so when the first step to making these cracks the way I want is by taking a large divot out first, and then we'll take the crease brush and start cutting it in really, really deep. Oh. Okay, I'm at 5. And at subdivide collapse. I actually want to switch to subdivide edges at this point because we're adding the fine details. Cracks is obviously very fine detail. So I want to add that with subdivide edges. And I'm going to start the crack in the back. I don't want it to be so straight though. Well, let me again reference this one. What did I do here? Yeah, just start in the back. I'm going to push down holding control. Cut into the actual divot portion. And then just, a zigzag line around like that. All right, that's the beginning of the crack. And then we can do something kind of fun. So the next step, typically, when I sculpt these sort of details, is to grab the pinch brush, which I can do with the P hotkey. And start to pinch this detail closer together. Because that's really, like, muddy when it comes to being a scratch. Or a crack, rather. So we want to tighten that up. And when I do the pinch brush, it also pinches in the y-axis. So it's removing the depth. It's removing the depth away from our crack. So what's kind of fun with this object, since it features the way that the shape is, like it's a boxy shape basically. So I can lock the y-axis. All right, so meaning that the vertices, whenever they're sculpted, do not move in the y-axis, only in x and y, only in x and z. So I can pinch and leave the depth the way it is. This is actually super helpful because cracks can be notoriously difficult to get really, really sharp. So the fact that I can do this, being able to limit the axes that it's being manipulated, gives us a much tighter effect. Also, in addition to pinching, I can also do Inflate, which will push the surfaces outward according to the normal, and that also tightens up the crack into itself. All right, so I'm using the Inflate brush. It's looking really good. Once I have the crack nice and tight, there's a few more steps, maybe just a couple more steps. First one is I want to grab, let's just use the snake hook brush and change the fall off to be sharp just like this. And then I can kind of tighten up the zigzag. You know, it kind of smoothed out a little bit, but I want the crack to feel, you know, crack's not smooth, it's jagged. So that's what I'm going for. I'm just sort of making that jagged. Oh, so back to the pinch aspect. In this case, I can, let's see, I only want to pinch really in the X-axis pretty much. So I can lock X and Z, or Y and Z, yeah, and leave X open. And then I can pinch those two together. And that, it doesn't work perfectly because, you know, it's at an angle, but it works okay. Use the Inflate brush to tighten that up. Go back to pinch. That one's looking a little rough. I might have to do this one kind of old-fashioned. Yeah, since it's at that angle, I guess I can't really use that feature. Let's disable the lock and just pinch it normally. Inflate it normally. There we go. All right, so now that I've got the pattern a little more zigzagged as well, let me do that down here. All right, that feels a little bit better. All right, so we're ready to then kind of take this level of detail that we applied here and apply it to the surrounding crack, the surrounding surface of the crack. So back to our dialed in scrape brush. We can start cutting those details in. Because right now it's a little bit like this is a perfect triangle, essentially, so there's no reason for that to be perfect. So let's just beat it up. Might be a good chance to use, go back to the more subtle area plane. Am I locked on anything? No. Also, the end of the crack here is kind of wonky. I want to make that more subtle. There we go. But yeah, being diligent to touch all of these edges will pay off in the end. There we go. Some little pop marks coming into play. I like that. Go back to view plane. I just kind of flip back and forth between view plane and area as I kind of see fit, just as a way to keep it different use cases, but also keep a variety in play. Save. Thank you. Save it. All right, so maybe I should just lower the scope of this rather than try to do the whole thing. Just try and cover all of the various features that I try and sculpt. So we've covered beating up the edge big time, beating up the corners, I guess, adding a crack. What other thing? Oh, pop marks. You know, we've loosely talked about that, but the way I like to create a pop mark is using the view plane. And, you know, if we're looking directly at the front, this shouldn't do hardly anything except just flatten it out. But if I tilt the angle down a little bit, we're going to start to get some subtle pop marks. And I'm going to, maybe now is when I do enable the radius, our old friend radius. And the more drastic the angle, the deeper the pop mark. The more subtle the angle, the more subtle the pop mark. So adding a few of these throughout is just going to help the overall look. I don't really know what causes pop marks. I want to say that like rain and water will start to do that. But that's how you can add that sort of feature. Is there anything else I'm leaving out? We've got about 15 minutes left. Are there any questions I'm missing? I think I've pretty much covered everything. It's just a matter of applying all these techniques to the entire gravestone. Motive saying sculpting looks like it is very rewarding. It really is. It really is. When you're not making silly mistakes like I've been making, it's definitely a rewarding art form. 100% true. Sorry about the old cold. Let's see, save it. And again, I'm just making sure I'm not missing any questions. Will there be a Christmas stream? Yes, there will be. Well, there will be a December stream. I've been playing with that the past couple days actually for, I'll show you that too. Maybe I'll start winding down the stream. You've probably seen enough of sculpting this gravestone. But yeah, just got to apply all those techniques to the whole thing and then you'll be done. I'll save it. What I have been working on is kind of a December Christmas-ish theme. Not trying to beat the themes to death necessarily, but what did I come up with? Procedural Flame. I saw someone on Twitter create like a flame as if it were like a torch flame, like completely procedurally, no particle systems or anything. I thought that was really cool. So I started my own yesterday to see what I could come up with. I think it's this one. Isn't? Oh, I forgot that I reset to default. Input. I like to use tools as my spacebar action. There we go. So yeah, I'm thinking what I'm going to do for December is show you how to create this. And instead of be just a small flame, I want to add it to a fireplace. So this kind of concept, and it's all nodes. It's actually not even that complex, to be honest with you. But it's EV, so it's running in real time. But like this is the node network. It's really not that crazy. But I think the effect looks decent. What do you guys think? Is that somewhat believable? You know, it's kind of, I'm not going for photoreal, but just believable-ish. I want it to feel good, like a fire. So yeah, I'm thinking, do I have the flu? I hope I don't have the flu. Oh no, I think I have the flu. Anyway, I'll worry about that. It's not your problem. So yeah, well, I'm thinking of doing this, but creating a whole fireplace so that it's like a fireplace fire, not just a torch. And other than this, I got the fireplace setup, I believe. It's pretty heavy density-wise. But let the textures load. And all these textures are from Texture Haven, which is HDRI Haven's like sister site. And so yeah, I'm going to use this to put as like the surrounding asset. We'll put a fire in the middle, and then I'll show you how to create really only the fire stuff. That we just have to have a scene to put it in and to create a feature image. So that's what I'm thinking for December. I need to make sure all the kinks are worked out of the workflow, and then you'll probably see me publish that pretty soon. All that to say, I'm gonna do this in December. That's really all I'm saying. So yeah, we have about 10 minutes. I'll show you real quick, for those who want to know what I've been working on, because you probably noticed I told you it would be this way, but I'm streaming once a month, which is obviously not every week like I was streaming for a long time, pretty much every week. But I'm doing once a month to be able to focus on a portrait course, like trying to do the biggest, most like accurate, fully featured portrait course, how to create a human portrait with Blender, modeling, texturing, sculpting, shading, rendering, the whole process, how to create like a photorealistic portrait. And one thing that you guys know about me is I do not I've never really taken the time to learn anatomy properly. Well, that was step number one. Like I gotta nip that in the bud and learn my anatomy, my facial anatomy at least. So that is what I've been working on. And the thing that I came up with to make that most doable is I realized I started watching videos, right, about just people on YouTube very systematically going over all the bones and the muscle groups and stuff like that. And nothing really stuck. It was just hard to stick. And so I think it's that concept of, you know, you have to write it down to remember it. People say I don't ever remember things unless I write it down. So it's the same sort of concept that I came up with to teach myself, and a pretty cool thing came out of it. Is it this one? So I modeled a skull, I modeled a layer of muscles, and I modeled some fat pads too. And I'm gonna create this final Ecorche asset. You can see here that this is running in Eevee. I tried to give it my all, a complete detail. But what's nice about it is that we also have bone groups that are color coordinated. And then we have labels as well that are sort of tattooed into the texture. So you've got your main bone groups, and then you've got also bone like shapes, or like more minor bone features, you know, so like your glabella, the nasal bone, I think that's a major one, but lacrimal bone, ethmoid, zygomatic, and just the process of creating this has taught me anatomy so much better. So this is what I've been working on, and you know, I figure, well, why just leave it to myself when other people could probably learn this way? So this will at least be a source file to download in the final course. In addition, it's not just going to be bones either. If we turn those things off, but so you'll have your regular bone textures. We'll have a muscle group, which I'm also doing the same treatment. I am texturing it, adding labels tattooed. And so yeah, this should be really, really useful for anyone who wants to get into learning anatomy for yourself, because if you go online, you get a bunch of pictures, but they're all from certain angles. They're 2D images, so you can't like zoom around the whole thing, hide certain layers. It's just going to be an interactive type of 3D asset. We also have fat pads, which I'm not quite done with. I'm in the process of texturing those. And then there's also going to be like, you know, a final skin on the outside, so you can see how all these layers work together. It's going to be an asset that will be included with the big course, which is still, you know, probably a little less than a year away. But I'm really excited about it. I mean, it's taught me anatomy so much better than any other source, and I think it'll be helpful. And I'm probably going to make it like a Blender Market product in the next month or so. But it's fun. All of it started as just my own research and development, and a pretty cool asset came out of it. So that's what I've been working on. And the course is coming along real well. I'm really excited. I think it's going to be something special. So yeah, that's it. If anyone cared about that, wondering where I've been, what I've been doing, that's what I've been doing. It might, I don't know if it looks like a lot, but holy cow, like trying to weave all these muscles together in the proper way. The fact that you look up various different images of the face and all the muscles, they all have their little nuances. Some people connect the muscles in different places. I think there's just an element of like inaccuracy, because, you know, like all of this stuff is like compressed inside the face. So like once you tear the face apart and see these things, like it's no longer perfectly the way it was whenever the skin was on top. Anyway, I just think that all the study over the years, there's little discrepancies in how anatomy works. So I've been like looking at multiple, like every muscle, how does it look in this picture? How does it look in this picture? And then kind of combine them so you get the middle ground. Anyway, it's been a ton of work, but I think this is quite accurate and should be a good resource. I'll stop talking about it and let you guys go. Thank you so much for joining the stream. I appreciate you. It's good to hang out again. And the word mandible comes straight into your mind. That's funny. Make sure there's not any last minute questions. Awesome. Definitely give the tombstone a try, Motive. I don't recognize your name, so I wonder if this is your first stream, but welcome if it is. And to anyone else, if it's your first. We have a lot of fun in the streams. There's a lot of regular people that we have our inside jokes and we catch up. We're kind of like digital friends at this point. So I really love the stream. I hope it was educational today. And have a great rest of your Tuesday, and I will see you in December. Probably another month before I see you again. But keep an eye on the schedule. If we switch back over there, I can quickly go over who is next. We have a pretty cool stream from Lampel talking about new features. New members, if you are a new member of CG Cookie, jump on this stream with Wes. He takes you through the website, how to get the most out of the website. Our heart behind what we do, the mission behind what CG Cookie does. So yeah, that's a great stream. It's also just fun to hang out with new people in there. Then you've got new features in 2.81. That's going to be from Lampel. That's going to be really good. And yeah, November, I've also got another stream for creating this autumn lantern. Just another modeling project. I don't know, maybe I'll do shading for this one. What did I say I was going to do? Modeling efficiency with modifiers, rendering for realism. Okay, so my goal with this one is to do modeling and shading. I think I should be able to if I remember this project correctly. So yeah, I'll see you in November. Sorry, I forgot what month it is. I'll see you in November and then again in December. So that's going to be all. Thank you so much again. Have a great rest of your Tuesday. Goodbye.